Hello, everyone, and welcome to the lecture that we should have been having face-to-face tonight in our class. As you all probably know by now, I have a fever. It's a fever I probably wouldn't even have known that I had, except for the fact that I had to take my temperature before I came to campus. So just over an abundance of caution, myself and our liaison that has to do with COVID said that I do have to stay home. So because of my poor internet, I thought the best way would be for me to pre-record a lecture for you that you guys can watch and then participate in the assignments at your leisure. So what we're going to be talking about is basically the questionnaire that you guys participated in last class, as well as diving into some of the content. And I did get a chance to look at your responses from the module, from the discussion board this week, where you talked about what you're really interested in getting to learn about. And a lot of those are going to be covered as we move along through the textbook. Some of them are going to be dug into a little bit more deeply as you get into more specific classes that have to do with the criminal justice system. So we will touch upon most of these topics, and we will get into some of the details, and we will also get into some of the broad ideas also of the criminal justice system. So let's take a look first at the questions that you guys asked me. So let's start with the first question. What do you want to learn? Well, I compiled your answers and I kind of put them together so that they weren't repetitive. So if you might not see your specific answer, but you'll see an idea. I don't think that I left any answers out. So what do you want to learn? Well, most of you wanted to learn things like why people commit crimes, information about our court system, the roles of people in the criminal justice field, various career paths, police versus a correction officer, how the criminal justice system works, history of criminal justice, how laws are formed and enforced, as well as laws, punishment, and police versus citizens' rights. So in the beginning, we will be taking a look at some of the roles of the people in the criminal justice field. That was your first assignment that you had to do. And when we get back to class, we will definitely be going over that and sharing your responses. And we'll also start to take a look at a little bit how the criminal justice system works, as well as the history. So those are the first few things that we'll take a look at. And then as we go through the class, we'll touch upon some of these other things. The first one, why people commit crimes, we will touch upon some of that, but that is more of a psychology piece. And for those of you that don't know, I also teach Intro to Psych as well as Human Development. So if you take Intro to Psych or a course like Abnormal Psych or Forensic Psych, you'll learn a little bit more about that specifically. It's a little bit more of a psychology piece. So I asked you guys, how do you learn best? And I compiled your answers again, and a lot of you said class discussions, asking questions, lectures, reading, videos and podcasts. Some of you said you're hands-on learners, notes that get handed out, fun. Who doesn't like fun, and listening to others talk about the material. So we'll try to touch upon all of those things since this is a hybrid class, and now since today, of course, I can't be there, some of these things will be limited, but we'll do our best and we'll make the best of this situation this semester. I added a little picture of my pets. Actually, the golden is Benny. He passed away almost a year ago. And this is Billy, and she is still alive. But I put this in here because how do you learn best? Well, I think that Billy learned best from Benny by example, and that's an example of them, one learning from the other. Okay, so what should this class not be like? Well, it shouldn't be all remote. We're going to hope that that's not the case. It shouldn't be all lectures. Goodness knows I can really talk. However, I will do my best not to just talk at you. It should not be boring. well, I'll do my best with that as well. It shouldn't be negative. And this is actually a really good point. It should be respectful. We are going to touch upon topics from time to time that possibly we don't all agree with, whether it's in class or on the discussion board through Canvas. Please remember to be respectful. We all come from different backgrounds. We all are people with our own views. And even though we don't agree, we do need to respect one another and respect those views and those opinions. We can disagree, but we can do that respectfully. It shouldn't be too much info all at once. I really have tried to break down things so that you're not getting a ton of information at once, and you'll see with this PowerPoint, we're just going to be touching upon some of the content this week. It shouldn't be tons of reading without discussion. No, I'm not one to give tons of reading, and it shouldn't be memorizing everything. And no, this is not a class about memorization, so you will not be requested to memorize little bits of information and spit it back out. I want you to critically think about the material. I want you to think of how it applies to you or someone that you know or a real life setting. So what are the most important criminal justice issues in today's world? You guys had a lot of really good thoughts, and we will start to talk about some of those in our next class. Race, racism, racial inequality, false confessions, varying prison sentences, gender, respect, pride, abuse of power, inequality, police training, or perhaps maybe what you meant with the lack of police training in certain areas, overcriminalization, violence, overall court jail system. Some of you felt that the courts and the jail system is not working or not working efficiently. Youth understanding of the law and how they benefit society, the death penalty, and sentence overhaul. So some really interesting things that you guys have been thinking about, and that's what that question served to do, is to get you to start to think about things. Think about the world around you. Think about our country and what's going on right now. And how does that pertain to this class? Okay, so what would you like to know about me? So I'll do my best. I wrote down the questions that I got, and I also threw in a few pictures of my life because a few of you asked about me. And so I'll start with explaining those. This is Billy, my dog. I've got chickens and we sell eggs. There's Billy and the chickens. I have a huge garden. I love to garden. I did read that one of you was a farmer, which is really interesting. I'm sure I could pick your brain for a long time about that. And we also gather sap for someone who makes syrup in the winter. So those are some things about me that I figured I'd throw in there. As you know, I think I told you guys I live on 13 acres in the middle of nowhere. So what do I like to teach in criminal justice? Well, I really like to talk about current crime and how it applies to some of the sections that we go over. So I really like to talk about various cases and relate that to the material. I love talking about what you think about certain cases, how you think things turned out, or why do you think they turned out the way that they did, and like I said, how it pertains to our criminal justice system. So we'll go over more of that in future classes. What is my experience in corrections? Well, I worked as a school psychologist, and I worked with inmates who had varying levels of education. Most of them were under the age of 22. And they had had special education services in the past, and I did intakes with them. I did testing, IQ testing, and social emotional testing, and I also did counseling. And I loved the job, and it was very rewarding. Okay, so I told you a little bit about myself. That was the next thing that I got, just a little bit of who I am. Kids and dog, that's kind of my life, and eggs. We're in the egg business here. Let's see. Why criminal justice? Why New Hampshire? Why community college? Well, I think I may have described this before. I kind of fell into the community college system. I worked as an adjunct when I was still working for the Department of Correction down in Connecticut. I would drive down to Connecticut, and then on Mondays I would drive home and go directly to the Keene campus when it was over on Washington Street, which it is back on Washington Street temporarily. And I would teach intro to psychology as an adjunct instructor. I grew up in New Hampshire. I went to Keene High. I graduated not going to tell you when. I graduated a long time ago, and I ended up just coming back here when I was married before I had kids, and but I didn't want to give up my job in Connecticut because it was a good job. So I ended up eventually leaving the Connecticut Department of Correction job once I had kids and they got to be mobile and were not they needed a lot of care. And like I said I have twins. They're 11 now. But when they were 3, I ended up leaving the Department of Correction and ended up being able to work at River Valley. There is no place else that I applied. I loved teaching there, and I knew I wanted to work more with students, and I started doing advising, and then I got the job as a professor. So I think that answers those questions. What trauma did I go through? Okay, so I think I mentioned when I was going through my life, I went through some trauma as I was going through school. And as I told you, I'm also a psychology professor. So I have no problem talking at all about the trauma that I went through. When I was in my early 20s, my father lost his job. I was at Syracuse going to school. I came home. We were going through some real financial troubles, and my brother was struggling with addiction, and my father was struggling with money, and he ended up taking his own life. And so that was a huge family trauma that I went through and really defined me and made me realize I needed to kind of get on with my life and do something with my life. And in my father's memory. So I went to school and ended up doing psychology, and that's kind of how I started on this path to where I am now. Let's see. What is the most rewarding event I experienced in the criminal justice field? This is an easy one. I used to, like I said, work with inmates who had not yet received their high school diploma or their GED. And every year we would hold a graduation in the facility where the inmates were. Now, some of these inmates were there for 20, 30 years. Some of them were getting their high school diploma at older ages, but it's the one time they were actually able to have a contact visit with a family member. So to see the family come in and celebrate this accomplishment was the most tear-jerking experience I've ever been witness to live. And that was absolutely just an amazing experience, and so rewarding to see what these individuals had been able to accomplish. Now, some were going to be able to get out, and they would now have that diploma with them. And the goal, obviously, is to reduce recidivism, make sure that these inmates have skills so that they don't come back into prison. And then, who is the most high-profile inmate I had contact with? So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Cheshire, Connecticut murders. Well, I was in the Department of Correction working when this heinous crime happened. And at the time, I was working at the Supermax prison that held death row and all the the high profile inmates. Ended up having contact with this person. And this is a link to the story if you wanted to read about what happened to Dr. Pettit and his family. And this is Stephen Hayes, who is now incarcerated at another location. And my understanding is he's actually going through a gender transformation where he is trying to transition to become a woman. And he said that was previously diagnosed with gender dysphoria as a young age that was never addressed or treated. And so that's an interesting fact about that. So I'm going to stop right now because this is just the first clip of the video, and we will have part 2 coming up.